This is Ed in San Diego. In fact, behind me is the pathway along the Konakai Resort in Shelter Island, San Diego. This is a real picture, although I did color enhance with contrast and saturation. But that's a real scene. Joanne and I walk down this pathway a few times a week on our walk. That's behind me is part of the San Diego Yacht Club, which is a famous old prestigious uh, yacht club. All the bigwigs belong to it. I'm not one. We just walk there. This is about leadership, and I'm the least leader of all you here. So I'm just going to play happy moderator and get out of your way talking about what leadership should be and could be. And author Stephen Howard is going to help guide this conversation, but everybody has the mic. So with us is Ron and Marty Cooper from the Washington area. Welcome. And
Thank you.
Christian Ter-Nedden from Orange County, California. Dr. Ken Lloyd from San Fernando Valley in LA. Stephen Howard, currently in Phoenix. And I'm in Seaport Village, downtown San Diego. This is about leadership and what about it? And today is election day. And I'm basically feeling anxious about all of this, although it was a glorious night on TV last night with all the entertainment. Did anybody else watch Lady Gaga sing God Bless America at the piano?
No, I heard it was great.
It was moving. Much better than Kate Smith, but I have that on video also here. But I recorded this one because this was really good and meaningful. Dr. Ken Lloyd, leaders aren't born, right? But some have more of a personality or a desire to learn how to be an effective leader. Doesn't mean dictatorial, does it?
Oh, no, not necessarily dictatorial. Leadership, certainly you talk about motivation to learn. I think effective leaders are always in a learning mode to continue to develop their skills, abilities, insights, understanding of their people. But it's also quite situational. You vary the leadership style depending upon the situation that we're in, depending upon the individuals with whom we're working as part of a team. But if it's a crisis and the resources are high, the timing is tight, the stakes are very high, that's going to call for a different kind of leadership style than a, if you will, day-to-day ongoing kind of leadership process where things are moving along at a relatively normal rate and normal pace. Certainly, if I'm leading the Titanic and we've hit an iceberg, I'm not going to say, all right, everybody, let's sit down, let's meet, let's really discuss the various options. Let's see what we want to really do here. I'm going to have to act more decisively, more forcefully, more individually, and really exert some command in this. We're in a crisis. On the other hand, we're in the ocean, it's smooth, it's calm. Want to make sure the team is all literally and figuratively on board. So I'll work with them, deal with them, and basically understand individuals as well as the overall picture. So that's kind of the view of it. Again, learning all the way.
Stephen, what's your take?
Absolutely correct. Learning is the key. Continuous learning is key, particularly in the last 10 years or so. I mean, we've seen so much change. I like to say that the world was changing before COVID, but it certainly got into hyperspeed during COVID and afterwards. Totally agree with that. I think I totally agree. Leaders are not born. There are some leaders, there's some tendencies of leadership that might be inherited, but I really think it's something we learn. We learn from our parents, we learn from our school teachers, we learn on the playground. And that brings up one of my pain points, is that on the playground, and it still happens today, which is, I'm shocked, when a boy says, okay, here's what we're going to do, and gets everyone organized and everything, boy, he's showing leadership skills. But when a young girl does that, she's immediately told, don't be bossy. don't be bossy, Susie. Let the other children have a say. And that is so wrong. And I think that's one of the reasons we have a deficit of very strong, powerful, thoughtful, emotional female leaders around the world.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to navigate that with two daughters. You're totally right, Stephen. Couldn't relate more to that. It's a matter of certainly role modeling. My wife and I are doing our best to do that, but also to really seek out opportunities within the school system to get our daughters leadership skills that we believe that they both deserve and that they should have. So for instance, my younger daughter Angelica was in the in ASB, which is the school organization that puts on events for the school. It's kind of hard to get in. They make a big to do about, getting in and being qualified for it and so on and so forth. Turns out most of the kids in there were rather on their phones than actually doing something. But Angelica learned a lot that way. And for Natalie, my older daughter, being on the board of directors of a historical house / museum and advising the city council of the city where I live on historical matters, those are opportunities that we helped give them to overcome exactly what you're talking about. But you have to make an effort, but particularly if you have daughters.
What about speaking style, tone of voice?
The person has to be authentic, Ed. I mean, you have to understand the difference between being a great orator, the Barack Obamas, the Ronald Reagans, the Winston Churchills, Margaret Thatchers of the world, and being a leader who can convey a message. And you can convey a message without being necessarily forceful. In fact, the more inclusive you are in your communications and getting people involved and asking for their input, that, communications, I love to tell people, we have 2 ears and a mouth. I think Ron said that to me one time also. But, if we listen twice as much as we talk as a leader, we're going to be a much better leader.
Marty Cooper, what's your view of women leadership style of speaking? If you could just take that angle for a moment.
I'm trying to think, of the ones that I've listened to. I'm more of a behind the scenes person. So I enjoy listening to women that are confident, come forth with confidence and know what they're talking about.
Ed, let me, I'll advance that just a little bit more. I agree with everything that has been said to this point. I'm going to go back to a very elementary principle from my perspective. A leader is a person, anyone who is influencing anyone else, even if it's only one person. Right. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And we're almost always influencing somebody somewhere. In tone of voice has been mentioned, and I have a tone of voice. And more than a couple of times, Marty has told me that it's not what you said so much as it is how you said it. And so we need to be very careful about being perhaps dictatorial with the tone of our voice. And so we need to be very conscious of what it is we're saying, how to say it, the person with whom we're interacting, and all of these things. So again, I'm not a believer in any form or fashion that a leader is born. You become a leader if that's a choice you make. And a leader has nothing to do with any words on a business card, any shingles you have hanging on the wall, or anything like that.
Well said. Ken?
Well, it's interesting. I've read some studies that talk about why, I'll use the word, managers lead as they do. And one of the most powerful and compelling influences goes back to the person's very first manager, the first person for whom they worked. Just as children model behaviors of parents, we're all role models in that regard. We're role models when we're in leadership positions. And it has our behavior, and certainly including tone as well as content and style, and the process we use to influence others, clearly impacts the employees who are on our team, and they will be influenced to the point that when they go out and engage in leadership behaviors, they're likely to emulate, copy what we did and what we've been doing. So we have to keep that in mind as well, that we're out there in these leadership roles, but we are not just coaches, which we should be, but we're influencers. And I'm not wild about that word, but we are influencing and impacting the behavior and future behavior of those who are on our team and in our group. So it's something to keep in mind that we talk about teaching, we talk about learning, we are educating future leaders by our behaviors.
Let's not talk about politics too much, but election day today, and if Harris wins, I believe that in my gut that she's basically untested in the world, and there's some bullies out there who are definitely going to put the pedal to the metal and create issues that's going to confront if if she is the president, how she's going to react. And Ron, what kind of a person, you don't have to name names or anything, but what kind of a person would you think she should appoint as Secretary of State? Assuming this, we're just dreaming right now. We don't know anything.
Yeah, with no names mentioned, I would encourage her, if I had any role at all in advising, to have a person, select a person who is skilled at international relationships. You necessarily need to know the various statutes, laws you're dealing with. You need to know the culture of the people you're dealing with. And so it's a person who knows these type of attributes and are willing to adapt and accept other people. And as we partner with other countries around the world, I think it's a matter of us assimilating them into our culture, us to them. And it's, for me, it's less so dominating us, that in the context that we were talking just a moment ago, you're taking over a male-dominated world, and that doesn't make you a lesser of a leader kind of thing. But that's a slightly different topic.
Yeah. Marty, would you like to comment?
I would like for her to pick a strong person, a person that knows how to deal with others. As Ron said, you're dealing with different personalities, and study the personality that you're going to go see, and work with them in a favorable way, but be very strong.
Yeah, Stephen.
I want to add the word humble
Mm-hmm.
to the person that needs to be the Secretary of State, because outside the United States, the U.S. is perceived as fairly arrogant. And so that representative of the United States as Secretary of State, a bit of humility. So in my mind, I'm thinking a combination of a Colin Powell and a Condoleezza Rice, rather than Hillary Clinton, for instance, that Obama appointed, and the former CEO of ExxonMobil, whose name escapes me at the moment, those two individuals took the job and presented themselves as the Secretary of State very forcefully, that it was all about them. Where if you look at the Colin Powells and Condoleezza Rice, they were more humble about it. They represented the office. They were representing the country first and not themselves, if that makes sense to you.
Ken, would you like to add?
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here and name names. Name one name. I think if Kamala wants to get off to the kind of start and handle international relations the way we're all talking about, I think she does want someone who's experienced, someone who is strong, and perhaps someone who'll help bring some unity into our own country. And with that in mind, I think with all of her UN experience, Nikki Haley would be an amazing Secretary of State. Bring in a Republican, which Kamala has said she'll do, a leader. She's a strong person, but I think that this would be a very interesting way to go, to get someone who understands the world, is respected in the world, And look, she's from the exact opposite party. She even, in spite of all that she dealt with Donald Trump, did not come out and walk away from him. That was her decision. I just think a person like that from the opposite party would help within the US as well as domestically and internationally by bringing in someone who's well regarded and respected and who actually understands the world community. That's just a suggestion.
I happen to agree, and that's amazing that we're in sync.
Why is it amazing we're in sync?
Well, because we haven't discussed this at all, but I
Yeah.
had the exact same thoughts as an opportunity. I also thought of Liz Cheney as a, but that might be a better choice for something domestic. But yeah, Nikki Haley, I think, would be a brilliant selection, and already has contacts and is not a stranger. Yes, Christian. Yes, Christian.
I love this idea, Ken, but one thing we haven't mentioned is that Nikki Haley has her roots are in India. You know, it would be a person of color that is the Secretary of State. It would be somebody who actually has an international background, which I think would be a huge asset.
Stephen, what about this aspect of humanity? Do you think if Harris is the winner, that humanity will rule the day suddenly?
If she reads the book, and if her advisors read the book, it would be wonderful. It's a great step, quite
First,
frankly.
think of the Amazon reviews you'd get.
Yeah, well, I'll say maybe if we get Oprah to read the book and comment on it, because the book is about how we treat other people with kindness, compassion, respect, and peacefulness, and harmony and acceptance. So, you know, those are 6 pretty core elements that would make the world a better place, and international as well as interpersonal relationships better, without a doubt.
Without a doubt, this is the pathway towards our next segment here. Let's talk about humanity leadership in companies. There's so much division out there in the media anyway, and out there in the streets. And workplace violence is a threat. And nobody wants that, of course. But how would you, as the coach, the leadership coach, advise a CEO like Ron on how do you shift to become more humanly focused and communicate that to the troops?
Well, I'll give you an example from an organization I think does it very well is Patagonia. They do a lot of things, not only for their people, but for the environment. But here's something that I wasn't aware of until just a couple of days ago. Patagonia today has shut all of its stores to enable all of its staff to go vote. Not just give them 2 hours off, 3 hours off. They have closed their operations today. Now that to me
that's a paid day, right?
Yeah, it's a paid day, and
Right.
it's to me that's organizational leadership. It says, hey, it's important. And this is not the first time they've done it. They do this in the midterm elections and in the presidential general elections that are every 4 years. So I think that's just absolutely beautiful. I'll tell you what. I think sensitivity is a word that I don't use very often, but I think CEOs need to have, organizations have to have a bit more sensitivity. And here's something that happened to me this week. I've been asked to go to Long Island and do training, a 1-day training for an Indian pharmaceutical company, a global company that has manufacturing facilities in New York and in Massachusetts. And I got the slide deck that was produced in India. So we often talk about how Americans don't understand the world. This is how India doesn't understand the United States. 2/3 of the way through the presentation, they're talking about when obstacles come up, we call them monkeys. And what do you do to get rid of monkeys? You shoot them. And there was a picture of a handgun. Now, I am not going to go to Long Island, New York later this month in front of a group of employees and show a slide that has a handgun in it. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do it. And if they insist on it, I just won't show the slide. But that's that lack of sensitivity. And it's not
Mhm.
just an American problem, it's a global problem that we as human beings, we are not sensitive to what I call the emotional wake. And I'm not the first one who came up with that, by the way, but the emotional wake that we create in every interaction that we have with another human being. So after, even after this discussion today, I'll sit back and think, what is the emotional, what do I think? What do I feel? And what am I going to do after this conversation? And I'm hoping that, I come into this conversation hoping that all of you will walk away and have certain way you think, what you're going to do, and how you feel on not only my input, but on anybody else's inputs that you hear today. So it's that sensitivity, I think, is lacking, and we can blame time constraint or time poor, but I think it's just our attitudes these days. We're not sensitive to other human beings.
Yes, Ron.
And I totally agree with Stephen in his
I could marry
comment.
you, Ron.
Okay.
No one ever
And,
tells me.
I would also add the terms, to me, they're synonymous, that sensitivity, empathy, compassion. But the decisions I make, I want to know how they're going to impact other people. And the only way I can know how they're going to impact other people is I care to know those within my circle of influence, those within my organization. And I don't mean just matching a face with a name. I want to know who they're made of. I want to know their strengths. I want to know their emotions. And so as I know that, I will know the impact of the decisions I make on them. I wrote a chapter on, I call it Steal or Kneel. And really the context of all that is, the steal part is, I made a decision. I know the facts and factors on which I base my decision, and I'll stay by it for as long as I'll stand by that, for as long as the facts and factors don't change. But the kneel part is, I know the impact that my decision will have on different people. And to use Stephen's expressions, I want to be appropriately empathetic and compassionate with those, and I want to help those who are maybe adversely affected by whatever decisions I make, to understand how to adapt to a decision I made. And so that's a lot of my feelings about this general topic.
Yes, Christian.
I love what Ron just said, and I think that, of course, it's the right thing to do morally. It's you're a good human being if you act like this as a leader, but I also think it's just smart. It's a form of risk management if you listen to the people that are being impacted by your decision. And that's something that came up quite a bit with my team, and I had to learn that the hard way. Oftentimes, I made decisions, and then people reacted and said, "But what about this impact? What about that impact?" And then I thought, you know what? Maybe I was premature in making those decisions. I should have listened more to what everybody else was saying, and then made my decisions based on my abilities and my judgment, yes, but also on the information, and I'm using the word information to make it neutral, that I'm getting from other people.
Marty, would you like to add?
I agree with Ron. Can you believe that? But as we were raising Joanne, and we try to do with our granddaughter, you have an opinion, or you have your say. So what do you think? So I agree with asking your employees for their input, because they are working with you.
Mhm.
So I agree that people have an opinion, and it would help you with your decision making.
And I'm going to interject here real quickly, Dr. Lloyd, I know you have an input, but I like to encourage leaders to do think, what if various scenarios were to happen? I know the impact of what can happen. And Dr. Lloyd, I'm going to go back to your example of the Titanic. Well, the what if part is, I don't have the calendars or committee time to reach a decision. I've got to react right now. I have to know what I'm going to do, but that's a part of being a leader. You know, I'm responsible for every decision I make. Some decisions I can think through and think ahead of what if I were to encounter this, that, and the other. I know the impact on people, but those are some of the things that I think we as leaders have to think into and think through.
No, absolutely. You're totally right. And just to push a little further on that same point, when we look at the decisions that we're going to make, we actually have a whole continuum. We can make it ourselves and got to think about it. Just as Christian said, what will the impact be? How will it influence? We can ask for our employees' inputs on it. We can give them the decision to make subject to our approval. We can delegate it. In other words, we have a full range here. We don't want to stick with one, captain of the Titanic. You're not going to delegate it. Hey, we hit the iceberg. All right, guys, what should we do? I'm giving this to you. But think about the decision, its impact, the content. What is it going to do? What are the likely outcomes? And to recognize that there's not one automatic way to go. And also to understand that if we do delegate it, we've delegated the authority. We've given our team the right to make that decision, but at the same time, can't delegate responsibility. It still is ultimately ours. So even if I've delegated it, and whatever way it goes, if it goes south, I'm still responsible and accept that responsibility. But I can delegate it. It's empowering for the employees. It helps them learn, grow, develop, build their own skills. Or backing up a little bit to what Christian said, let's pull in their inputs. What do you think? What are the ways to go? We can even make it as a joint decision or based on their inputs, listening and considering those inputs, then I'll make the decision. The last thing we want to do is just be in a vacuum and just making them unilaterally, and here they are, and this is just a list. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what it is. I've made these decisions. Because then you are absolutely doing the antithesis of demonstrating humanity in your leadership style. And you're then going to be destined at one point or another, sooner, more likely than later, to fail.
Let's talk about psychological safety in the workplace. That's going to be a major theme at our New York meeting in December. But I think this is what we're talking about right now. Am I wrong about that, Stephen? Psychological safety in the workplace?
It's a huge component of it, Ed. And Google released some research. I believe it was last year. It might have been 2022, but I think it was 2023. And their research showed that the number one single contributing factor to success of teams, workplace teams, was having psychological safety. And by that, they defined it as being able to speak up without being ridiculed by your peers and being able to throw ideas out there without somebody saying, well, yeah, no wonder you think that way. You come from California or something silly like that. Or I've been in meetings, I've heard people say, yeah, you think that because you went to tech instead of state. Or I'm sure Ron's heard it. Yeah, you're an Air Force guy, not a Navy guy, or vice versa type thing. And being able to admit mistakes, learn from mistakes, and share mistakes so that they are not repeated or replicated by others without the fear of punishment. So psychological safety goes a long ways towards building, being a strong leader and having strong teams together.
Yes, Christian.
So what Stephen just said, and you kind of teed it up, Ed, is where I wanted this discussion to go when I looked at the topic. Because to me, this is the foundation for raising leaders, for developing leaders. If you don't have that, if you have a situation where people are afraid to speak up, I don't see how they could ever become leaders unless you change that environment. To me, the first step of taking on leadership tasks, and then later on through that correct characteristics, is to not be afraid to speak up and to be encouraged to speak up in a meeting in front of people. One of the reasons why I love being with all of you so often is I get this opportunity and I feel very comfortable speaking my mind here.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Stephen, do you want to show a slide about, from your quotes or from the book,
I'll
one of
show
the
some
books?
in a minute, but I think let's, I'm going to yield the floor to the esteemed senator from Maryland.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I advance what Christian was saying, that the psychologically safe environment includes being able to offer a counterposing view and be able to do so knowing that my job's not in jeopardy. But I think that has to do with a leader's confidence. And some of us have come through life where we started out not having a lot of confidence, but we have built our confidence to the point where I welcome counterposing views. I welcome debate. I don't think less of you because possibly we have counterposing views. I do welcome your thoughts. I want to know what your thoughts are. I'd like to know why you are thinking the way you do, but we can freely discuss that. After which, as Dr. Lloyd said, I will make a decision. We're at a point where I don't need any more inputs. I'm going to make a decision. Thank you for your inputs. And I know the impact of my decision on everyone involved, but I have the confidence that I will tell you exactly why I made this decision. I appreciate all of your inputs. They've been equally evaluated, and my decision is, and I will stand by it, and I will tell you how I came about this decision based on processing all the facts and factors. Somewhat of a long-winded explanation, but that to me is a part of the humanity of which Stephen Howard writes about.
You see, an underlying that approach, running through those discussions, two key words: respect and trust. And build that within the discussion, within the entity, and everything works out that much more productively. It's really important that we know our employees as individuals and that they sense they are respected. And this is a climate and atmosphere of trust. And it's fair, open, there's compassion, there's empathy and all. But those two key words, if they're missing, particularly if the trust is missing, we've got nothing. It's not going to go. We're not going to have loyalty, commitment, productivity, performance, any of that. Can't trust them. It's not going to happen. I sat in one meeting where the individual who was leading, in quotes, I use the term liberally in this situation, addressed a person who came in with a different opinion and said, this leader, in quotes, said, "Why are you so defensive? You're getting so defensive here. Just knock down the defensiveness." And all this individual was doing was not showing defensiveness, but was simply saying, let me express some other ways that this can be done and some other thoughts. And to this leader, that was defensiveness, which it wasn't at all. And this cast a pall over the whole meeting. The only good news that came out of it was the meeting was pretty short. It ended pretty darn quickly. And sometimes that's a plus too.
So as we approach the end of this in around 15 minutes, Ron, if you may, if you will allow me to say this as referring to your background as a jet pilot and being refueled in midair, okay? And then now the analogy here is a leader takes a pause, gets refueled somehow, and then goes forward, either in the same direction or a different direction. I know you have a lot to think about, a lot to say because of your experience on this kind of idea, but could you draw an analogy about how you feel as a jet fighter pilot and getting refueled and then moving on? What's that feeling of renewal or expansion or redirection?
Well, and I'm going to say it can be two things, and my thoughts are new opportunities. I'm refueled, and there may be a different direction I'll go, but I have options available to me, and so I think one application to this, Ed, is we have to know ourselves. We have to know those within our circle of influence. What does it take for rest and recharge? And so the rest and recharge is an extremely important factor. And when we are rested and recharged, we think better. We've got more energy. We've been refueled, but we individually need to know, and we as leaders need to know our people well enough to know, hey, I sense maybe you are perhaps overtaken with and so forth. Why don't you just take the rest of the day off and do whatever? But it's being able to, again, I'm going to use the word empathy. We're able to empathize with that person because we know them. We know what they are going through. We can almost live inside of them, so to speak. And I don't mean that in any psychic way. We know our people well enough to know what they need.
Marty?
I was just thinking about a time when I was working and the deputy of the division called me in and said, I need for you to do this. So I went back and I did it. And then when I gave it to him, he goes, I didn't expect you to work so fast on it. Well, I'm going to say, to Ron's way of thinking, I was recharged because he asked me to do something that maybe he wouldn't have asked me to do. And I hope that makes sense in my way of thinking of being recharged.
Well, and I'll just add to that very quickly. Marty is the type person that when she knows she has helped and otherwise supported someone, Christian, Stephen, Dr. Lloyd, anybody on this call, she's recharged knowing she is the catalyst to help you get to wherever it is you want to go. That's part of her recharge.
So it's encouragement that you're talking about, Marty. You were encouraged.
Yes.
Valued.
Right on, Ed, Christian, thank you. That's right, exactly. Boy, we need that.
Yes, we do.
So let me make some news here. Stephen, I asked Stephen to deliver the keynote address at New York on 12/12. It'll be available on TV live and of course recorded for future broadcasts. This has to be right up your alley. And this kind of a conversation, if you could somehow get the audience after a long day, as we go into what I call the rapport reception, and this is going to be in the U.S. headquarters of HSBC. They call it the Global Trading Bank, very large organization that has hosted and sponsored me 3 times in London and now first time in New York. And this is going to be a big stage. So thank you for agreeing to do that. I want to encourage you to think about this topic that we're having today, and then somehow getting the audience involved remotely. You'll be remote, but they'll be in the chairs.
I'll just use the chat GPT takeaway from this and use that as the basis, I think. Actually, I want to share with everyone because in my mind just spinning right now positively. But something Christian said about his daughters and Ron and Ken focusing on trust and empathy and being valued. I was thinking my very first leadership experience. I was 16 years old, and the gentlemen who were running the Little League Baseball League in Las Vegas approached me, asked me to come to a meeting. I go, I'm 16 years old. Why do you want me to come to a meeting? What is a meeting? And they sat down and said, we are tired of adults umpiring our baseball games and getting angry. We wanted to do an experiment. Can you put together a group of your baseball playing friends and create an umpires and umpire next season's games? And I took that on as a challenge, and I got out the rule book and I trained about 12 of us. I was 16, so I think I had like 8 of us were like 16s. We had cars, and the other 4 were younger, and they did the younger leagues and we did the older leagues. And but the thing that Ken was talking about, when leaders do all these things, they get the results, they get the harmony in the workplace, blah, blah. But the other thing they get is leaders. And so every week, one of those gentlemen would come up to me after a couple of games and mentor me. and point out things positive and improvement wise. And I really grew in that experience of not only umpiring the games, but leading the cohort of the 12 or 14 other teenagers that I had who were umpiring those baseball games. So that it's that trust, but it's also that mentoring aspect, which will help create leaders, and which is why I believe leaders are, not born, but this is how you create leaders. So I just want to share that with people.
That's a brilliant story.
Yeah, it was great. And those, I remember those men to today. Fortunately, most of them have passed on, but I remember them and have high degree of respect for them. And they were successful businessmen. And now I know why they were successful. Now, they all ran their own companies, by the way, and they were all very successful. And now I know why.
I don't know what to say. Somebody talk.
Well, I'll add to that tells me also one of the problems with leadership in the workplace today, because leaders are not trained to be leaders. They're just thrown, first time leaders. They're just, hey, Ron, congratulations, you're going to run the department starting next week. I'll put a email out on Friday announcing your promotion. You're going to do a great job. If you have any problems, give me a call, but I know you'll do a great job. And that's it. Ron's thrown in the deep end of the pool and is now the supervisor, team leader, or whatever. And no one teaches them how to delegate, how to give feedback, how to communicate as a leader, how to handle conflict between people. All he knows now is I got to produce results because that's what my boss wants. And he doesn't know how to grow leaders. He's just thrown in the deep end.
Stephen, you're right on target. That happens all too frequently. And many of those thrust into a leadership position will say, I don't feel equipped. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you flounder. And so I am a strong believer, and my life is built around 4 men who mentored me, not in a formal capacity, but just in a relationship kind of way, that many of us are who we are because of the very positive influence and mentoring someone else has had on us. We need to identify and develop the leaders within our organization. Some people will call that type mentoring, well, you're just part of the good old boys network. But if we see the drive, determination, and the burning desire to become more than what we are, who we are, you develop those kind of people because they have a hunger. They are just burning desire, hungry to learn more and to be the kind of person we were created to be.
Yes, Christian.
How to get out of the good old boys network is you simply admit girls. And that way it will be a more co-ed mixed and therefore much better and much more successful way of doing things.
Yeah, and Christian, I'll comment to that by saying that develop the leaders within us. That is not a gender-specific term by my standards. That's leaders are all genders, or either gender.
I know you think this way, Ron, but you said somebody would accuse you of, with your male mentors of being good old boys, a good old boys network that was kind of, by definition, would be impenetrable to a woman. I know you don't think that way, though.
No, I definitely don't. It just happened to be 4 men. Okay, 4 men then. None of those 4 are living then or now, but Marty is. Marty is one of my mentors who has given me, Christian, to use your term, encouragement. And so, I'm willing to withstand anyone who thinks that, well, I'm a part of a good old boys network because 4 men mentored me. No, that's just the way it happened to be.
Is there a new book coming out in your mind about leadership for dummies?
Could be. It sounds like there's a real market for it. It's kind of interesting, though, when you're talking about moving people, if you will, into leadership positions without really recognizing that the position they may currently hold has absolutely nothing to do with functioning successfully as a leader. Take a super salesperson doing a great job, really enjoys being out there on a commission basis, meeting new people, delivering high quality product, partnering with customers. Now you're going to be a sales manager, and we're going to need you to track the sales. We're going to need you to do all this stuff on the computer. You're going to be going to these meetings. and you're going to be leading the team. And this does not fit their history, their experience, their goals, their training, any of that. Doesn't mean that it's an automatic fail, but if we're going to be doing that, let's try to avoid losing a great salesperson and getting a questionable leader out of the deal. It's working with these folks along the way, continuing to develop their broad brain skills, understanding their motivations. Some are more motivated to be in leadership / administrative roles than others. And it's very easy to take a totally successful person and put them into a failure situation. That's 2 big strikes out of the blue. So yeah, Leadership for Dummies is probably out there, but if not, Stephen, go for it.
Maybe, I don't know, but you're absolutely right, because research shows over 60% of good individual contributors who are promoted into supervisory or managerial positions fail within the first year. And many of them quit because they don't have the right coping skills. They're not taught how to do things, and they get frustrated and they get overwhelmed. 60%, over 60%. And that's not me, that's research talking. And that's it is why I wrote the 2 of the books that came out earlier this year. I wrote a book about delegation skills and another one about effective feedback skills, because people aren't taught that. They're just thrown into and told, here, run this team. And then they don't know how to give feedback. They only know how to give feedback based on how it's been given to them. They don't have a process for it, which is a shame. And they don't know how to delegate, because they don't know how to effectively delegate. They know how to delegate. Hey, Christian, you go do this. But they don't know an effective process for delegation. That's why I wrote the 2 books that came out midsummer.
Thank you so much. So, Ron, why don't you take us in for a smooth landing here, and let's end this thing.
All right. So are leaders born? I don't believe so at all. I think it's been mentioned early on that there's some of us who were raised in families where I believe it's a family culture where we pick up the traits, the culture of reading, learning from others, associating with others. But it is a journey to develop the skills to lead. And we can come from backgrounds where we just don't feel we have the confidence to do it. But by surrounding ourselves with people who willingly accept us and are willing to help us, we can become who we aspire to be. And it is a matter of relationships and having harmony within us, and we want to pass that on to others. When that harmony is there, we can definitely create a very positive work environment. We've addressed the psychologically safe space before. We all want the freedom to be able to express ourselves very freely without having to wonder if our job is in jeopardy by doing so. So it is a matter of being a very effective leader, knowing the people and knowing what they are, let's say, their strengths, their desires, their emotional aptitudes. It is a matter of us learning and wanting to know who our people are. But when we choose to be that way, and I do believe it is definitely a decision, that the upcoming conference, you have those who choose to make the decision to adapt to. They can, they will, but it's a journey. It's not a one and done. It is a continuous journey of learning.
Thank you so much. So, audience, thank you for tuning in to watch this show. We should continue down this pathway, and you're welcome to come back to the next show. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
That's good.
be well.
Nice meeting you, Marty.
Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Great day.
Thank
Me
you.
too. Nice
Yeah.
to meet you.